Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're honored to have noted UCSB Professor Yunte Huang to read from and discuss his critically acclaimed book, Daughter of the Dragon, Anime Wong's Rendezvous with American History. Professor Yunte Huang received his BA in English from Beijing and his PhD in English from SUNY Buffalo. He taught at Harvard University for a while before joining the faculty at UCSB, Santa Barbara. A Guggenheim Fellow, his books include Trans-Pacific Imaginations, Chinese Whispers, Charlie Chan, which won the Edgar Award and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Inseparable, the original Siamese twins and their rendezvous with American history, which was chosen by Newsweek as one of the best nonfiction books of 2018. Professor Wong is also the editor of the Big Red Book of Modern Chinese Literature, and the translator into Chinese of Ezra Pound's The Peace and Cantos. As a best-selling author, he has been featured on CBS, National Public Radio, C-SPAN Book TV, here for the Charlie Chan book, BBC, Australian National Radio, Irish National Radio, and many others. Anime Wong emerged from turn-of-the-century Los Angeles to become old Hollywood's most famous Chinese-American actress. A screen siren who captivated global audiences and signed her publicity photos, with a touch of defiance, Orientally Yours. Now, more than a century after her birth, Yunte Huang narrates Wong's tragic life story, retracing her journey from Chinatown to silent-era Hollywood, and from Weimar Berlin to decadent pre-war Shanghai, and then capturing American television in its infancy. As Professor Wong shows, Wong's Rendezvous with History features a remarkable parade of characters, including a smitten Walter Benjamin and an equally smitten Marlene Dietrich. Challenging perceptions of Wong as a dragon lady, Madame Butterfly, or China doll, Wong's biography reflects the raging anti-Chinese xenophobia, unabashed sexism, and ageism toward women that define both Hollywood and America in Wong's all-too-brief 56 years on Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Yunte Huang.
Well, thank you, Dennis. I actually prefer the early introduction when we were still talking, when you got it all from Wikipedia page. I think those sorry. Well, thank you all for coming. And I'm really happy to be back here. I've done this at least, I think, third time I'm doing launch my book here with Dennis in this great shop in La Jolla. And so, since we chatted, when we were not on camera, we chatted. I assume you guys are all very familiar with Anime One's story. So I thought, how am I going to do this? I'm an English professor. I have different ways of teaching. And so one time when I was doing a summer course, and I designed some kind of pop quizzes. And so the first class, some students asked, what are the pop quizzes like, right? So they always want to know, what is the final exam like? And because it impacts their grades. So when it comes pop quizzes, I say, well, first of all, they pop. And secondly, they're quizzical. What else do you want to know? So I thought, how do I do this kind of pop quiz kind of introduction and without really, going into the nitty-gritty of all the details about her life. Otherwise, we'll be here, all night until tomorrow or, tomorrow night. Anyway, so I'll just give a brief summary of her, chronology, and then I will just maybe highlight a few things that I learned or during the time of writing this book, and also talk a little bit about afterlife of this book after I finished writing and the reviews and the interviews and everything else, and then I take some questions from you guys. Hopefully that's okay. In other words, no pop quizzes toward the end, except for me, I guess. So please pop them and make them quizzical. So Anime Wong, first of all, I was going to say, I've done quite a few interviews before this book came out, actually, in the past few weeks. And they always ask me, of course, why did you write about her? And sometimes we get, sometimes I was really earnest and serious answering the question, going back to the trilogy, right? Everything, started with Charlie Chan, a book I didn't know I would write. Eventually, I ended up writing, and then that really set me on this journey, kind of rendezvous with America, and so each of the three books has the subtitle has rendezvous in it, because my purpose is really to tell the kind of describe the epic journey of Asian Americans in the making of American history, starting with Charlie Chan, this kind of controversial Chinese icon, and who's funny, but also to many Asian Americans, it's kind of demeaning character of Asian Americans, stereotypical. And followed by the Siamese twins, Chen and Bunker. This is like 19th century American history, and they were looked at as kind of subhuman, freaks. And ironically, they made a lot of money by displaying themselves, and eventually settled down, retired very comfortably to a small town in North Carolina and became slaveholders. So this kind of table is turned, and they married two white sisters, and they ended up having 21 children. So this kind of ironic turn in the journey, and now Anime One. So overall, this kind of trilogy, as you see, these are very kind of prominent cultural icons as far as Asian Americans are concerned, and they really represented, this kind of Asian American experience in this country. So I thought I would try to kind of unpack the complexity of these cultural icons, and elevate them and reframe them, and especially kind of humanize them in some way in order to help us understand. I actually help myself understand about American culture, because American culture is still sort of like a paradox to me. There's always this side and that side and everything. So that's my long-winded answer, serious answer about why I wrote this book. When you get asked me again and again, then of course my Charlie Chan side came out. So I always say, well, she was actually my great aunt. And people's like, oh really? Oh my God, I didn't know that. So I usually give them a minute to squirm and and then I say, well, no, sorry, it's a joke. But as a matter of fact, Wong and Huang are the same last name in Chinese. It's actually just spelled differently, because Cantonese pronounced as Wong, and Mandarin Chinese is Huang. So in some sense, yeah, Chinese. I mean, if you go back 500 years, if you have the same family name, you're probably related. So I mean, in a way, it's not really a joke, right? So my great aunt, Anime Wang, quote unquote, was born in a Chinese laundry in Los Angeles, in 1905, in her father's laundry, just a few blocks away from Chinatown. Her parents started out their laundry in Chinatown, and then they moved outside of Chinatown because apparently they have more business opportunities outside, right? Not everybody wants to come in to Chinatown to do laundry. It's easier to spread out. That move actually was kind of important because they are still within the a stone's throw distance from Chinatown, and they still have the communal connection. But moving beyond gave really Anime One kind of early exposure to multicultural kind of background. There's Eastern European immigrants, the Spanish and everything, because that's kind of important, because later on she became a global star, right? Go to Europe and make all these movies and all that, and travel all over the world. So the early years, of course, it put her kind of in a I would say perilous position, in the sense of being bullied by kids of other ethnicity and all that, without the safety kind of protection of Chinatown. So speaking of Chinatown, one of the kind of intellectual investment I made in writing this book is trying to describe this umbilical cord that ties Hollywood to Chinatown. Okay, this is kind of I would say one of the surprising discoveries I made writing this book, is that when Hollywood was rising, becoming the center of the film industry, Chinatown was right there, not too far. Today, of course, driving across LA is impossible, right? But in those years, it's pretty easy just to trek across town. And because of the supposedly exotic setting, the street, the curiosity shops, and the displays of the food and everything, and people walking around wearing different kind of clothes and everything. So Hollywood really loves, just to go across the street and, across town and take the street scene. So it's a ready-made set for Hollywood. Didn't cost them anything. And also, that also has to do with the nature of cinema in the early years, because in the beginning, film is actually about shock and awe, right? They record sometimes ordinary scenes like barber shop, Chinatown funeral, procession, and one of the favorite topics was actually laundromat, because laundromat is kind of robotic, mechanical, movement, and makes this very easy because the constant movement, because they always use still camera. The camera does not move around, does not zoom at all. There's no close-up for a long time. So that kind of movement actually provides kind of good material for the early cinema. So, but also the robotic movement of Chinese laundryman also tied into this kind of exoticism because of cartoonish kind of movement. Also ties into the American kind of racial imagination that somehow these coolie laborers are kind of subhuman or superhuman. That they don't get tired. They have that superhuman skill, kind of energy that they can come back and then work over and over again. What I call the kind of techno-orientalism. That's an early version, because today you can also think about the imagination. A lot of sci-fi, for instance, earlier days, portraying Japan, as the kind of super future city. Dr. Fu Manchu is another version, the super, genius, evil genius who can speak 20 languages, can control your mind, and think about Manchurian Candidate, for instance. That kind of imagination actually started out from laundromat. That coolie labor can handle these kind of almost like non-human demands. They can do that. So therefore, it's kind of ironic that the first biggest Chinese, film icon was born in a Chinese laundromat. So that's kind of serendipitous in some ways. So that's one. Remember, the pop quiz is going to be on that. How do you explain the umbilical cord? The two aspects, right? So the convenience of the street set, right, and also the nature of the technical orientalism, right? But anyway, so the other thing was going on with the rise of Hollywood. There was so-called movie-struck girls, right? Young girls growing up, like say anywhere small town in Midwest, they will buy one-way train ticket, stepping off the Central Station, later on Union Station, hoping to become a big star on the screen, and they always buy one-way train ticket. Fortunately for Anime Wong, my great aunt, she didn't need to hop on train or buy a one-way ticket. Hollywood came to her just for the reasons I explained earlier. Hollywood constantly come to Chinatown for this. So she was hanging out, and she had the same dream as any girl from Midwest, And so she got a bit part in 1919. 1919, for those are familiar with history, there was the Spanish flu, right? And people are dying on the street. And they were making, so in 1918, at the end of the Great War, and the Spanish flu was, becoming pandemic, and Hollywood was making two major China films. At the time, it's called the yellow flicks. It's kind of derogatory way called yellow flicks, but also called the China films. There's a Broken Blossom, right? D.W. Griffith, who always has a thing for the exotic, and the other is the Red Lantern, starring with our friend Alla Nazimova, yeah. Right? And so Anime One had a bit part because they needed 600 Chinese extras, and it was a very difficult task to scare up 600 live bodies because people all hiding behind doors, didn't want to come out because of the pandemic. Literally, people dying on the street. So anyone got lucky, there was a demand for Chinese, and she made it. And that was really her first one. So she became the uncredited, one of the three kind of lantern carriers in this Red Lantern. And so she was so excited. Of course, she was proud. And when the movie was coming out, she saved up, a whole week of lunch money and took her friends to, to the gallery and bought the best seats, sit upper level of the gallery, trying to show off. And of course, I mean, she was uncredited in the scene. And so her friend said, "Which one is you?" She said, "I don't know, maybe the outside one." So even today, Dennis did a great thing. Is had a display of most of the films that she was in. The one missing, of course, is the Red Lantern, for obvious reasons, because she was not recognized in this film, uncredited, unrecognized. But that film gave her really a toehold, right, in Hollywood, and she became friends with Alla Nazimova, and joined the parties at Garden of Alla as well. And then she became friends with other, Hollywood stars, and really that led to one thing led to another. She was, she got more parts eventually, and of course her biggest turn was the Toll of the Sea, 1922. And the reason she was cast as the lead for The Toll of the Sea, something is imaginable actually for Hollywood, because all those years Hollywood would just do yellowface, right? No Chinese actress can really play any lead role at all. But for why, Toll of the Sea, she was cast as the lead role. The irony is this: this is like so-called the first Technicolor film. And they needed to experiment to test how effective the color is on real people, especially the contrast between the effect of the color on Caucasian actors and on the Asian actors because of different skin color. So they needed real Asian actors. So she got lucky in this way, and but it's a silent film, and technically critics actually were appalled by the use of color because they couldn't tell Caucasians and Asians apart in this film. They complained about it. Like, what's the use of color if you can't show off, the beauty of the white and they all blend together. So but anyway, despite all that, she went on to get more roles and all that. But this is just one success she had, because after this, she was never able to get a lead role again for quite a few years, for one simple reason, right? In that the anti-miscegenation law. I mean, before the Hays Code, production code, Hollywood always had this kind of implied don'ts and don't bother, or these things. Anti-miscegenation law, rules basically a non-white actress cannot kiss or be kissed by a white actor on screen because it will offend American sense of the correctness, I guess. So in the subsequent years, all the way to 1927, when they built the Chinese theater, Grauman's Chinese theater, and she will play this and that, and no China film could do without her in it, apparently, because she was the biggest Chinese star at the time. But no film could really have her as the lead. So that's she's everywhere. Almost all 1927. There's like 4 China-related films. There was let's see, Old San Francisco with Warner Oland, and this is the hot. This one breaks my heart. It's Chinese Parrot, because it is the second Charlie Chan film based on second Charlie Chan novel, directed by this golden boy, right? Paul Lenny. It breaks my heart because the reels are lost, so we can't see the movie. And anyone was in it as a dancer, and so after that, she made a very smart move, just like Josephine Baker or Paul Robeson, these non-white artists in those years. They went to Europe. So she went to Germany, and arriving in Germany with her sister Lulu in the spring of 1928. And of course, 1928 for Weimar Republic, this is like dancing on the edge of a volcano. That's right before the rise of the Nazis and everything. So she stepped into the scene, and so she acted, performed in Germany, in France, and in England, so all over Europe. And so that way, she went to Europe to be recognized as an American. Right? Later on, she will go to Australia to be recognized as Chinese. So, it's kind of ironic. So it's interesting in the sense that tracking her, her career, you discover a lot of kind of paradox. Earlier I talked about American paradox. If you unpack these icons, you will see a lot of contradictions and paradoxes and all that. So in 1929, she made this, the swan song of the silent era, Piccadilly. And there's another one, Piccadilly as well. And this is Hollywood or film was transitioning from silent to talkie. And this is really the last silent film she made. And this is one of my favorite Anime Wang films for a simple reason, that she was, not in Hollywood, and she was able to perform her skills and talents in a more free way, I think. I'm not saying Europe didn't have, racial problems. Far from it, actually. If you look at Germany, right? But at least she was cast in this kind of most provocative and erotic role. And so the story, don't want to give you a spoiler alert. But anyway, she was great in this film. And because of that, she was, interestingly, asked to star in a stage play. And that's really serious performance, right? British theater is Shakespeare's town, really. And so she was asked to, lead in the Circle of Chalk, okay, co-starring with Laurence Olivier. And so remember, all the way up to Piccadilly, it was silent. She didn't need to speak. She just mimed, but didn't need to speak. But on theater, on stage, she needed to talk. So the moment she opened her mouth, the critics were still kind of at awe at her performance and everything. She was very good. But the minute she opened her mouth, she had this kind of California girl, Valley girl accent, and they were appalled. I feel you can't do California accent on stage. Even today, right? Theater still has this kind of British accent, right? When I first went to teach at Harvard, for instance, moved from Buffalo, it kind of occurred to me, kind of curious, why are people around me always have the British accent? Right? I always thought they're from Europe. Only later on, I discovered that, they are just as American as apple pie. But as you see, the prestige of the accent, especially for theater. And of course, that's one. And the other thing is when film transitioned from silent to talkie, of course, a lot of the early, silent stars fell basically by the wayside. The moment they spoke their mouth, opened their mouth, the charm, dispelled the charm right away. So that's when she realized, okay, that's the serious problem. If she wanted to make it still in film, she need to, change the accent. So she spent a lot of money, hire a speech, a therapist, a coach, a tutor. And so she left America as like a young flapper, wearing chic clothes. And she returned in 1930, wearing, European high fashion and sporting upper-class British accent. So totally transformed. And then, of course, she made this vintage Daughter of the Dragon, from which my book, drew its title, playing next to Warner Oland. At the time, Warner Oland was already playing Fu Manchu and Charlie Chan, the good and bad Chinaman, so-called. And so he was asked to, to play Fu Manchu again, and Anime Wang played the daughter, who will rise to the occasion and, take vengeance on her father's enemies. And that really cemented her reputation or her legacy as the Dragon Lady. Okay, so today, she's really, on the one hand, she's a totally revered person in Asian American cultural history. On the other hand, a lot of people are still kind of ambivalent about, her participation in this kind of perpetuating this stereotype of Dragon Lady. So from Tall of the Sea, in which she plays Madame Butterfly character, and the other extreme is Dragon Lady, right? And in this one of the films, it's not here, she will wear this nail guards, like really long nail guards, gems studded nail guards. And as a professor, as a teacher, I always have the fantasy, I will wear these nail guards. Next time when I teach, when I point at my students to answer a question, that will make me a formidable professor, right? You better answer the question really well, right? So as you see, it's not really a joke in the sense that she really was given this very limited space to perform because these stereotypes were not her choice, right? These are Hollywood stereotypes imposed upon her. In order to make it, in order to get a job, she need to play. So my narrative or my book really tries to describe this kind of delicate dance that between the convention and her subversion, and this kind of this one extreme of stereotype and the other. How did she pull it off? And as you see, it turns out she's very talented. She's a great writer. Actually, if you read her letters and her articles, newspaper articles, she actually barely graduated from high school, but she has somehow learned to write really well. And as Dennis earlier, in his introduction, she has some pet phrases. I'm a writer. I'm also write doggerel. I like parody. So her pet phrases are something like Orientally yours. Sign her so later on, I should have re-signed your books and say Orientally yours, right? Like Yunte Huang, because that's like kind of symbolic in a sense, tongue in cheek, right? That people look at her as this Oriental girl, whether Madame Butterfly or Dragon Lady, you're Oriental. So Orientally yours is sort of like spit back, accepting that title, but also spit back at you. And then the other paraphrase is that Confucius didn't say this. And then she will go on, deadpan. And the best example of her deadpan was actually in Shanghai Express when she was, co-starring next to, playing second fiddle, yes, to Marlene Dietrich. But she actually, if you watch the movie, right, we can talk about that all night, really, that she actually spoke better lines in many ways from the noir perspective, right? Yes, Marlene Dietrich took more than one man to change my name to Shanghai Lady. Yes, tough, good. But actually, Anime Wang spoke even tougher lines as the person who actually killed the villain, changed the direction of the train or history or the plot. So it is actually a lowly prostitute that she played that changed history. No one else could, all the guns, all the power, all the imperial powers and everything. She was the one who changed history. In that sense, so she's very tough and brilliant. But of course, her tragedy, we are talking about this. So the Look magazine in 1938 had her on the cover and also called her the most beautiful Chinese girl, right? But of course, as the most beautiful Chinese girl, she couldn't really marry a white man because of the anti-miscegenation law. So it's not just on the screen, it's also in real life. And people today didn't know that. Loving versus Virginia happened in 1967. That year, even when the law, Supreme Court just, came down the case, there are still about more than a dozen U.S. states still had the anti-miscegenation law on the books, actually. So her friend, for instance, James Wang Hao, a very famous cinematographer, right? The Chinese man who won Oscar twice for camera. When he made a lot of money in those years, because James Hao kind of somehow figured out how to use black and white photo and make Caucasian actresses look better. Because actually it's kind of tough, because in black and white photo in those years, the blue eyes look really pale, kind of lifeless. But James Wang Hao somehow figured out to use shadow, like deep shadow, to make them look good. So he was highly sought after as a cameraman. Every actress wanted him, to take their publicity photo and all that. So he made a lot of money that way. And one year he bought a really expensive car at the cost of like $37,000. And when he gunned it down, Sunset Strip, people will stare like, which family will let this Chinese houseboy drive around with an expensive car like that? So that's kind of environment. I mean, that's joke, but actually not. So when James Wang Hao was dating his Caucasian, girlfriend, lover, eventually they got married in France because their marriage was not recognized in the United States. And the poor couple, had to hide their marriage for many decades, actually. So that was really a lesson, kind of contrast for Enemy Wang, in the sense that, of course, if you are if you are one of the working class, people, actually in those years, despite the law, for instance, a lot of Irish women will marry Chinese men at the risk of losing their citizenship because it's illegal. If you marry, an white woman marrying a Chinese man will actually cause you to lose your citizenship. But of course, if you're working class, the government will never come after you, right? But Enemy One was living in the limelight, unfortunately. Any misstep she took will lead to the end of her career and everything. So once again, we're talking about the most beautiful Chinese girl couldn't get married. So imagine her late years. So her career went downhill in some ways when she turned only like mid 30, and so the second half, like the last 1/3 of my book, I tried to describe not just the sexism or racism, but ageism, which is still around in Hollywood, especially for women. It's a tough industry to be in. And for Enemy One especially, she was facing not double jeopardy, but triple, right? There's a race, there's sexism, and there's ageism. So her career was going downhill in when she turned mid 30. Like her good friend Warner Oland, she turned to alcohol. So in her 50s, hi Carlos, that she will have imagine her days. I was trying to imagine how she became a landlady and owning some like real estate in Santa Monica, with the money she made from these movies. Not a whole lot, but enough that enabled her to purchase real estate. And so she will have passed her days, or the entire 50s, the decade, with drink in one hand, a cigarette in the other. And her brother Richard owned a gift shop in Santa Monica, and occasionally she will help him man the shop. So she will run around like an elderly maid, with a Chinese feather duster in some ways. And then she was, of course, just like a normal, Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. She was waiting for the big comeback, like many other, aging actresses. Everybody was waiting for the big comeback. For most of them, it never came. For her, it was coming because that Flower Drum Song, one of the biggest productions of China film in those years. It's like Barbie today, the Barbie film today, and a Flower Drum Song based on a Broadway musical. Oh, it's now being adapted for the screen, and she was given a big part. This Madame Liang film role. She was gonna sing. That was her comeback. She was able, she would have been able to perform her singing and also the talent of dance and everything. But unfortunately, because of years of alcoholism, depression, and everything, she died of a heart attack at the age of 56. But the sad part, even sadder part, is that she was, when she was dying, the film screenplay was lying right next to her. So she was literally working, to the last minute, hoping for the big comeback, and it didn't come. But of course, her story does not end there. Today, somehow we look at around, the flourishing or the amazing success of Squid Games, all right, the Parasite, Korean films on Netflix, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Michelle Yeoh, winning Oscar. It is as if, Enemy One came back, alive and reclaimed the title, the honor. But of course, the U.S. Mint, fortunately, issued these quarters, and Enemy One was chosen as one of the 5 U.S. women to be commemorated on the U.S. quarter. But as somebody who have tracked her career, it's great she finally got her due, deserved the recognition. But as somebody who has studied her career, tracked, and with great admiration, I always knew that she's on the money, right, in the sense of betting. So that was really kind of my Enemy One story about my great aunt, who should have won an Oscar, but now she's on the money. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question here, Doug.
Yes.
In 1930, she appeared in a film in London, which was a spoof of The Taming of the Shrew.
Right.
And she had an interesting encounter with a very young assistant director, Alfred Hitchcock.
Absolutely.
You want to explain that encounter?
Well, I mean, Hitchcock, put a pie on her face, I believe, in the cut reel, and but she also had an encounter, I think, with Billy Wilder, when Billy Wilder was a taxi dancer at the Hotel Eaton in Berlin. When she first arrived, she checked in to Hotel Eaton, staying on this very fancy street in Berlin. And Billy Wilder at the time was a newspaper reporter. And in order to make extra money, he actually was at the roof garden, he was a taxi dancer. And of course, later on, he made many movies, including, especially I just mentioned, right, Sunset Boulevard. And Billy Wilder was great in the sense of unpacking, kind of penetrating into the problem of ageism. And when he made that movie, actually, not a lot of Hollywood moguls were not happy, wanted to drive him out of town, like go back to Germany. Can't make fun of us because it exposed the dark side of Hollywood. Because the movie is very sad, but it's also very ironic, right? So.
You have to explain what a taxi driver is.
Oh, taxi driver?
Yes.
It's like Uber dancer. Taxi dancer. Taxi dancer is a paid companion, right? Paid, when you don't have a dance partner, like, if you go to dance by yourself, you don't have a partner, then you can pay somebody to dance with you. It's like hiring a taxi. Yeah, taxi dancer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Today you can use Uber or Lyft, whatever you prefer.
Yunte, we need to ask you if you would discuss the tragedy of her not getting the lead in The Good Earth and the irony of her sister getting a minor role and her tragedy.
Well, thank you. So, The Good Earth, based on a novel by Pearl Buck, apparently was the biggest China film before Flower Drum Song. So she missed one boat, Enemy One, and so let me take it slowly. The Good Earth, the studio optioned the book, spent a lot of money, millions of dollars in those years. Actually, today will be like billions in some ways. And they hired an army of coolie to carve a California hillside into Chinese rice paddy. 4 years to carve that landscape. And that's how serious the investment was. So Carlos, we should make that investment as well if we make that movie. in Hawaii, maybe. Right. But so that's how serious it was. That's how big it was. And of course, if you know, The Good Earth is about a Chinese farmer, the rise and fall of Chinese farmer. And Enemy One really wanted, after the success of The Daughter of the Dragon, the Shanghai Express, and everything. Apparently, she was very talented. She was great. What's not to like. So that's her dream role, really. She really wanted that part as the female lead. But of course, as soon as even Pearl Buck herself, growing up, coming from, growing up in a Chinese missionary family, growing up in China, she will call herself half Chinese, actually, Pearl Buck. So she actually demanded, that this film requires genuine Chinese cast. But the studio heads were like, no way. I mean, people in Midwest, they want to see, real Chinese cast, and it's in a film about Chinese farmers, right? So that's the yellow face, of course, is the deeply entrenched, well-established tradition in many ways. And so the minute they cast Paul Mooney, this Austrian-Hungarian actor, as the male lead, Enemy One knew that there's no way that she will be cast because, apparently a white man and an Asian woman cannot pair on the screen. That's when she knew that it's pointless. So, she was heartbroken. And that's when she took off and went to China. And she traveled in China for 9 months in 1936. And I covered her tracks, describe her trip to China in great detail, actually. That's her so-called soul searching. Last time she went to Europe when she was disappointed by by Hollywood. And this time she went to China. And her sister, the irony here is that her sister Mary, younger sister, got a bit part in this film. And after that, her career didn't take off either. And unfortunately, Mary eventually got so depressed that she committed suicide. So, giving a role. But it's not just to Enemy One. The insult, and the Good Earth, that film, the insult is not really just to the Wang family or Enemy One, especially, was really the Chinese community. Today, some Chinese, American film historians will say, the Good Earth was really could have been our Gone with the Wind. Yeah. That's how big it was. But then how disappointed they were by this, blockbuster China film that didn't really have real Chinese, players, actors in it, except as ambience in the background and all that. So that's what one critic would call the MGM Chinese, whoever is in that. But that's the answer. Yeah, Nancy.
China, was she famous there? Did they know her films? Was she a big star?
Of course. I mean, they Googled her all those years. Even before there was Google, China already started Googling everything. Yes, of course. The minute she stepped into the limelight, Chinese newspapers and everything already, she will appear because of the popularity of Hollywood films. And it's inevitable that there is this famous and a beautiful Chinese actress, and China, of course, will be proud to claim her as one of their own. But absolutely, on the one hand, they're proud of her, but a lot of critics were not happy about these stereotypical roles she had to play. And especially things like, Thief of Baghdad, in which she wears very little clothes, show a lot of flesh and body. And so conservative Chinese critics were not happy that you bring humiliation or shame to China. So that trip is her soul-searching, China trip was there's a kind of divided, attitude. But once again, to show sexism is not American monopoly, right? Because on that trip, she also met up with her friend Warner Oland, who also arrived in China to promote, the new movie Charlie Chang in Shanghai, which was going to come out in a few months in China. And so Chinese totally opened their arms to welcome Mr. Chang from Sweden. They easily, conveniently forgave him for playing Dr. Fu Manchu, because those movies were banned in China. But Charlie Chan movies were popular. So they chose very conveniently for this man, we can accept you, but for her, we can't forgive you for, all these, roles you play. So that's what I'm saying, sexism is not an American monopoly, right? Yes, Larry.
It's a little off the...
Off is good, yes.
Good. It's pop quiz. During World War II, most of the Japanese actors were interned.
Right.
So Chinese actors were playing evil Japanese. I mean, how Philip Ahn and Richard Liu were all cast, and those were some of the biggest roles they ever had.
Absolutely.
And how did they take that in the Chinese community, that the only roles they could get were playing evil Japanese characters? Right.
This is like a Hunger Game, right? Whatever little morsel left, then you grab, right? Absolutely. This is your so-called wheelhouse, apparently. So yes, the Japanese internment created this kind of vacuum, right? Because the bits players, there's called ethnic bits players, right? There's Chinese, there's Japanese, there's Latinos and all Native Americans, all this, and they're all fighting for these bit parts, right? And because the Japanese, Americans or on the West Coast, they're all interned, create a vacuum for exactly like Chinese. And at the time, most Chinese Americans were desperate to distinguish themselves from Japanese. They wear buttons say China or I'm Chinese and things. And Life magazine will actually print like articles kind of in describing a pseudoscientific way how to distinguish, tell apart the Japanese and the Chinese. Totally pseudoscientific, not scientific at all. Totally stereotypes, perpetuating that as well. So just to give you another example in terms of kind of ethnic rivalry in those years, again, the tragic story created by exactly the limitation imposed upon these ethnic communities is fortune cookie. That we all thought fortune cookie, is a Chinese invention, right? No, not. Not just made in USA, was actually initially was a Japanese invention. It was started out as a tea garden in San Francisco. Was a kind of mochi, so kind of Japanese bakery, started this. But then when Japanese, were sent away to the camps, the Chinese businessmen, moved in and claimed to remodel that and turn that into the staple of Chinese fast food. So once again, this kind of, how things turn around and of course, Japanese, when they're forced out of their homes, sent to camps, their business was snapped up, their houses, real estate and everything. So including this, the bits road, the little minute roles they had, now taken up by other, ethnic groups. So it's total tragedy as well, yeah.
I have a question. I don't want to hog the questions. Could you explain the relationship between Marlene Dietrich and Anna May Wong off screen? How did they get along?
All I can say is they're chummy. And this is really from the eye of 7-year-old, Marie, that's Dietrich's daughter. And she was really the witness to, because she was able to go to the shoot. The film shoots was allowed actually. So later on in her memoir about her muti, mother, and she described the chummy, and the two of them will go to like the trailer, during breaks and to have coffee and listen to, records and all that. So from a 7-year-old, old that kind of innocent eye, the chumminess, of course, and Marlene Dietrich, of course, is openly bisexual, and it's a no-brainer. So for me to write about that aspect of Anna May Wong's, life, she's not that kind of person, not just because she's Chinese, or not just because she's kind of an introvert person, but she's not the kind of person who will parade her, her scandal, so-called, and then profit from it. Because, publicity stunt, scandal can be good or bad, right? Depending how you make use of it, right? But especially, on more serious note, for instance, 1938, Daughter of Shanghai, she was co-starring with Philip Ahn, the Korean-American actor. And this is like the only film Anna May Wong's, a character was given a happy romantic ending. Otherwise, she always either die or killed herself, or and anyway, or tragic ending. This is one film in which her character indeed has a romantic happy ending. Of course, this time it's just with another Asian man, not with a white man. Apparently, that's not allowed. And the other irony here is that Philip Ahn was supposedly gay. So imagine, and also the fact that Anna May and Philip, they were high school chums, friends. So, and the film, the happy ending, Philip Ahn's character proposes to Anna May Wong's character. So you imagine the Hollywood rumor mill just went crazy, and these two Asian stars must have something going on there. And they themselves actually did not want to stop the rumor. They even added fuel a little bit to that. You just take a guess, we are good friends, and how I feel about her, you should ask her, and she will say how I feel about him, ask him. So in a sense, this is like pre-Stonewall world. Imagine these are two Asian actors. They already encounter racism, and now this kind of gender issue, sexuality issue in the pre-Stonewall, because you know, Hollywood, most contracts has this kind of morality clause, right? If you're discovered to be gay, they can easily just kill off your career. You know, the studios can do that legally. So imagine, so they are, in a sense, they're using each other as the proverbial beard, in a sense. So Animal One's sexuality or identity, oftentimes it's manifested in a more subtle way through her gesture. For instance, the androgynous kind of, you know, apotheosis as the son of Dr. Fu Manchu rather than the daughter. And some of the, you know, photos taken by like Carl Van Vechten, you know, she'll wear, you know, top hat and tuxedo kind of menswear sometimes. So these are like coded messages. So she's not that kind of person who will openly kind of discuss her own affairs or anything. So that's, you know, that's the best I can say.
Two other examples of sexual irony that come to mind in the films, Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor, or Rock Hudson and Doris Day.
Yeah.
But
Of course.
It worked out. You know.
That's called the lavender, you know, marriages or
Yes.
couples or yeah, that's, I mean, those years really in pre-Stonewall, you know, era, a lot of,
Another marriage that comes to mind is Charles Lawton and
Elsa
The Bride of Frankenstein.
oh yeah,
Elsa
sure,
Lanchester.
yeah,
Pardon
or
me?
Judy Garland, you know,
Judy Garland,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
exactly, yeah, sure, yeah, Carlos.
I was going to say you write about a lot of really deep knowledge from a lot of deep knowledge of Hollywood and a love of the medium or the genre. Because I mean, Hollywood is a kind of a genre. Hollywood films
Right.
versus European films, or Hollywood's a certain. And you seem to be interested in Hollywood, not filmmaking. Hollywood. It's just they're the same and they're not. If you know what I mean.
Oh,
So I'm just curious about what was your relationship as a boy getting with movies? Did you fall in love with them, hate them? The American, the Chinese aspect of sort of like those kind of things. What did you?
uh-huh. Well, when I was growing up in this little town in China, there were no Hollywood films. Those are Soviet Union. Foreign films are like Soviet Union, Romanian, you know, Indian, Pakistani, you know, revolutionary films and politically correct ones. And my dad, who was a film buff, and because here's the thing, there's only one movie theater in town, and there's one movie that will run for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The same movie, right? There's no like multiple movies showing at the same time. As a film buff, my dad would take me, because there's no television in those years. The only post, you know, Prandtl entertainment was to go to the movie. So he would take me to the movie again and then again and again, the same movie. I watched over and again. That actually helped me, you know, train my critical eye, because later on my dad also do impressions, will help me analyze like this character spoke these lines and all that. So that's as close I can get to so-called Hollywood, you know. So Hollywood to me today, if I can give you one more example, because today it's about, you know, something about representation, right? Anime Wong, people ask me why I wrote about her. I mean, the real answer is that who can really represent the Chinese American experience better than Anime Wong, in a sense, especially in the, you know, first part of 20th century. No one else. She was the only kind of real Chinese face on the screen. So it's about representation. But when it comes to that, who represents China, in a sense? So in 1943, right, Madame Chiang Kai-shek, the year Lady from Chongqing and the Bombs over Burma were these two wartime propaganda movies that Anime Wong made, okay? And she donated her salary to China Relief. So when before Pearl Harbor broke out, because of the, you know, she went to China in 1936, 1 year before the full-scale Japanese invasion in China. And the minute that happened, she donated her clothes, you know, she brought back from China, spent a lot of money, bought clothes and designer clothes and everything. She donated her jewelries and everything. So wholeheartedly poured her heart into this China Relief and made these two movies. And then, of course, lo and behold, there was a real lady from Chongqing arrived in the United States, which is Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And she was, you know, she went to college in Georgia and later on Wesleyan in Massachusetts. She was well-spoken. She's Christian as well. And she was, you know, having a speaking tour in the United States to rally support for China, and especially for her husband's government, which was in trouble at the time, fighting the war against the Japanese. And Hollywood, of course, rolled out the red carpet to welcome Madame Chiang Kai-shek, the lady from Chongqing. And they had like a finale, which is a big celebration at a Hollywood Bowl. And everybody was there. Barbara Streisand, no, I was going to say Barbara Streisand, Barbara Stanwyck, everybody, who's and who, Loretta Young, and everybody. The only one missing face was Anime Wong. And so, because in those years, she was literally the face of China Relief. And now, so what I'm trying to say to answer kind of long-winded answer is that, of course, she cannot compete with 3 governments doing the publicity for the real lady from Chongqing, Madame Chiang Kai-shek. There's the Chinese government, there's the US government, there's Hollywood as the bigger government. In terms of publicity, these 3 machines creating this kind of publicity stunt for Madame Chiang Kai-shek, and she was left out, and that really broke her heart again, in a sense. Yeah. So that's my Hollywood answer.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.